One does not simply walk into Mordor.
Are you ready to die?
Dealing with Saruman might prove more difficult.
Your haste is less than remarkable. I should clearly not wait for an answer.
The Lord of the Rings Conquest, originally released in January of 2009 through developer Pandemic Studios and published by EA, is a game that... Okay, yes, fine, it's basically Star Wars Battlefront 2. You know, up to the point that I actually started working on this video, I don't think I ever realised how utterly shafted Pandemic were by EA. I'd played a fair handful of games produced by the developer, such as Destroy All Humans 1 and 2, The Saboteur, and yes, Star Wars Battlefront 1 and 2, and aside from the odd title receiving mixed reviews, I honestly can't think of a single Pandemic game that was outright hated on back in the day. I mean, aside from Mercenaries 2 maybe. I don't know, I never played it, but the reviews weren't the best. I mostly stuck to Battlefront 1 and 2, I gotta be honest.
What the fuck is going on? Oh, everyone has rocket launchers!
Of course.
So yeah, it kinda surprised me at first that EA would do away with Pandemic so casually. The studio was consistently active from the late 90s up to 2009, and for the work produced during that decade-long tenure, most people that I speak to tend to remember Pandemic as being a fairly solid developer. I can only assume that while EA were busy cutting up to 1,500 jobs in 2009, in order to apparently save up to $100 million a year, they took the black and white financial approach to things when bidding off Pandemic after reviewing the studio's final 3 projects. The Saboteur. The Saboteur is a fun, forgotten oddity of 2009 that people liked, but not a lot of people actually played. Whereas on the other hand, Mercenaries 2 wasn't exactly beloved, and it's probably more commonly remembered now for being frequent bargain bin material, as well as the ridiculous media stunt that saw EA blowing 20 grand on free petrol. I kid you not, this is what EA thought would sell Mercenaries 2 on release day. They took over a fuel station in North London, decked the place out to look like a military bunker, and then proceeded to offer each and every driver up to £40 of free fuel until the 20 grand was all used up. Which sounds like a real nice idea until you realise the sheer amount of chaos something like this causes. For those of you perhaps not from my homeland, allow me to offer you 2 simple facts. British people love a freebie. We love a freebie. But perhaps even more importantly, British people also really fucking hate traffic.
Do you want to live in London? Do you want to live life in the fast lane? Good fucking luck finding it!
Sure, free fuel is nice and all, no question about that, but this simple, cute 20 grand idea caused absolute hell. Hundreds of local residents complained about drivers coming in from basically anywhere that was within a drivable distance, which then caused gridlock traffic for what was essentially the entire day. So yeah, maybe blowing 20k on fuel for a marketing stunt that probably ended up being a bit more damaging to the game's reputation rather than boosting it wasn't the best idea. And of course we have the third of Pandemic's final games, The Lord of the Rings Conquest. And with everything that I've already said being taken into consideration, I think it's pretty obvious where EA's motivations came from for this one, because I would be very surprised if Pandemic were the brainchild behind this. After Mercenaries 2, a sequel to one of Pandemic's most critically acclaimed games that EA clearly assumed would just make buckets of money and ended up not doing so well, EA must have taken one quick look at the fact that Battlefront 2 sold like free fuel, then took a gander at their licenses and spotted Lord of the Rings just lying there, and then finally turned back to Pandemic and went, yeah, how'd you feel about making the exact same game again? But this time with swords. And that's exactly what they did. So, let's talk about The Lord of the Rings Conquest. And to kick things off, I just have to say it, this game is kind of dumb. Alright, so I've already gone on and on about Battlefront 2, the obvious shit is out there, but just in case you didn't believe me, let's just hammer home this particular point before we move on. Like Battlefront 2, Conquest features multiple game modes ranging from Team Deathmatch, Capture the Ring, Hero Team Deathmatch, and Assault. And again, like Battlefront 2, Conquest also offers a good and evil campaign, complete with missions that follow the official story of Lord of the Rings, and others that deviate from it. And again, like Battlefront 2, Conquest's primary gameplay loop generally consists of large-scale battles between two sides, with the player offered multiple classes and hero characters to choose from, such as warriors, archers, mages, scouts, and so on. The template is very much copy-pasted from Battlefront, with the single true change being that instead of Conquest being a shoot-'em-up experience, we're going full-blown hack and slash here. Sure, the archers give you something to shoot with, but for the most part, Conquest is very heavily drawing from the Jedi-Sith portion of gameplay from Battlefront 2, and basically just chucks a bunch of Lord of the Rings skins on them. I don't recall Faramir, or fuck it, any of the standard warrior classes, possessing the flaming sword of Beric Dondarrion in the movies, but apparently they do now. Remember when it was fun to reference Game of Thrones? They were the good old days, weren't they? And, yeah, that's basically it on the surface. That's the Lord of the Rings Conquest. And in spite of the fact that the game's core ideas and inspirations are about as original as stale bread, Conquest can be surprisingly fun. For starters, the sheer madness of large-scale battles set within the realm of Middle-earth is an absolute goldmine for entertainment. There's a reason that Return of the King was so beloved back in the day, and there's a reason that the following Shadow of Mordor would also be heralded as an excellent return to form for the video game branch of this franchise. When it works, it really works. And Conquest does, sometimes. Actually, come to think of it, Return of the King does make for a pretty good comparison piece. Both games loosely follow the trajectory of the movies, both feature large-scale dumb fun action with overly exaggerated character abilities, and both showcase an appreciation for just how damn exhilarating a good old-fashioned hack and slash can be. At its absolute best, Conquest offers a gritty, hard-hitting action experience. The impact of swords and melee attacks all feel weighty, the heroic difficulty is genuinely challenging at times and arguably offers the better experience when compared with the casual difficulty, and after seeing the unashamedly bonkers gameplay embellishments to your average Joe, such as spinning flame sword attacks, explosive arrows, and mages now being a regular Middle-earthian commodity, it's hard not to crack a massive smile at how stupidly entertaining Conquest can be. You just can't take this game seriously. We are here to literally just have fun.
Raise the tower and slay that traitor Saruman!
But this is also what then makes it real frustrating when you're not. After the first few hours of Conquest, with both the good and evil campaigns roughly lasting 5 to 6 hours apiece, you'll start to notice how things don't really seem to be progressing all that much from a gameplay point of view. You'll see your first troll or ent, and then proceed to control your first troll or ent, and it is exciting. But after 3 or 4 more times of doing it, the charm very quickly wears off. And it's the same with the hero characters. Controlling some of them is fun, but depending on which level you're currently playing, your assigned hero might end up being a hell of a lot blander than you might expect. Because they're essentially just souped up versions of the existing classes. Gandalf and Saruman are a lot of fun being OP wizards and all that, Aragorn and Faramir are fine as enhanced versions of the warrior class, and Gimli just kind of zooms around like a cannonball, which is genuinely hilarious. But then you'll get hero classes such as Legolas, who is literally just another archer, the Balrog, which is essentially just another troll with wings that also then happen to obscure the hell out of the camera, and Sauron, who happens to be so impractically tall that hitting anything ends up being a lot less fun and a lot more frustrating. In the end, I kind of just resorted to whacking the floor over and over again in order to gain maximum area of effect damage, but even this is a sad example of the murderous bastard seen at the start of the movies. Moving on from this to take a look at things on a broader level, you'll also come to notice as you progress through the campaign, first the good and then the evil once unlocked, you are essentially playing through the same level format with each and every mission, and it gets pretty dull after a while. Sure, a siege element or an escort mission or something else might get thrown in there to try shake things up, but the basic format of killing anything that moves so that you can then capture the strategic locations always remains the same for each and every level. Which means it's kinda hard to be surprised by anything when the game is essentially telling you, okay, do this in Moria, and now in Minas Tirith, and now in Rivendell, and now in Mordor, and now in... you get my point. Individually, these are all fine and I enjoy them for what they are, and I do admittedly have a lot of fun with this game, but when strung together in a series of continual missions, it gets old a lot faster than you'd think. Which is more of a shame for the evil campaign than the good, because by the time you actually get to it, most of the mechanics have grown pretty stale. The following section details spoilers for the game and the end of Return of the King. I'm not sure why you would be watching this if you haven't already seen the movies, but if you haven't, skip here to avoid spoilers. Have they gone? Imagine having not seen The Lord of the Rings. Okay, so here's the interesting thing about the evil campaign. Titled Rise of Sauron, the evil campaign picks up right at the end of Return of the King. Frodo is about to toss his ring into the boiling goop of Mount Doom, except instead of this being the final blow to end Sauron's reign of evil, the Nazgul manage to reclaim it. And as such, the following Rise of Sauron missions basically present an unofficial sequel to the Return of the King, if Frodo failed in his quest. As Gilead is once again decimated, Gondor is overrun, Rivendell falls, it all basically goes to shit, and you're front and center wrecking havoc with your band of orcs and Uruk-hai. It's a fun alternative timeline to the true ending of the story, with the final battle taking place in the Shire, Galadriel's prediction of death and enslavement finally coming to pass. Gandalf, of course, is the last hero to fall in defense of the hobbits, and the game ends with Sauron having won. And honestly, I love this sort of thing. Seeing an alternative timeline to a movie or series or whatever is never not fun. It's interesting to see where things might have gone, and although the Rise of Sauron is interesting, it would be a lot more fun if the gameplay wasn't so goddamn bland by this point. To be honest, half the reason stems from the fact that the orcs themselves aren't all that fun to play as. The warriors strangely suck in comparison to the Gondorians or Rohirrim, and why the developers didn't make the Nazgul a more regularly playable class for the evil campaign, I have no idea. Once the first mission is down, you barely ever see them again, even when killing Aragorn at Weathertop. Which is basically a crime. You have one of the most exhilarating fight scenes from the entire trilogy taking place between Aragorn and the Nazgul, and instead of letting us play as the Witch King or a regular Nazgul so that we can have a rematch, we get Saruman instead. Why? I love Saruman in this game and all, but come on, Nazgul vs Aragorn 2.0!
Again, it's like poetry, sort of they rhyme.
Well, whatever. Like I said, in small doses, this game is still a lot of fun, and this does seem to be the best approach when playing through Conquest. Play this game in small doses.
Only one reinforcement left.
So, yeah, that's pretty much all I've got to say on Lord of the Rings Conquest. I have to admit, once I started scripting this video, I quickly realised that aside from the primary gameplay, there really isn't much else worth touching on. There's not much point in talking about the story, as it's virtually non-existent. The music and the sound design are pretty much lifted straight from the movies, so again, not much to say there. Hugo Weaving returns as Elrond and narrator, but that's it for the original cast turning up. I guess if I have to say anything to round this off, it would be that the game itself feels a little bit unfinished. The AI can sometimes break, with characters either getting stuck or literally walking off edges at times. You can get absolutely slam dunked by enemies if surrounded, there's not much of a chance of getting out there once cornered, and the graphics really aren't the best, especially for 2009. Personally, I like to think it's because the Pandemic A-Team was busy with the Saboteur, which by comparison looks fucking beautiful and proudly stands as the swan song for Pandemic and one I do intend to review one day. Still, if you happen to find a cheap used copy or have a gander at some abandonware providers, hint hint wink wink, I would still recommend trying out Conquest. It's a dumb fun oddity that I definitely had a more positive experience with rather than a negative, and as for the PC version I'm currently running, I have to say that aside from the occasional texture bug, it runs absolutely fine. You might need a fan patch or two to smooth things over if you do run into some hiccups, but most abandonware providers seem to have already incorporated these, thus saving you the trouble. I'd like to thank my wonderful supporters over on Patreon for their incredible generosity, in particular the highest tiers, Game Master, DarkRaptor86, and BFD Survivor. Thank you all for watching, you beautiful bunch of Caspers. I'll see you in the next review.